So we have Passionlip, and this was an interesting one. Obviously, we had known about Passionlip for a while now. She's a unit that appears in Summer 9, and a lot of people were like, man, why didn't we get her like as the welfare there or as like an additional unit? And like, what took them so long to do it? And we actually got a little bit of answers from the Nasu and Takeuchi interview, which, by the way, I have a transcription and analysis of. Feel free to go watch that, though the Nasu and Takeuchi part is very long. But basically, we found out that a lot of this was due to, like Nasu had been saying it was Takeuchi, but we actually find out that a lot of it is like Takeuchi instead just trying to protect FGO, and him saying like, hey, if we release Passionlip in a bikini, that is going to impact the game and we're gonna get censored, basically. So turned out that it was just Nasu wanting something really bad and Takeuchi was just trying to be the voice of reason. And then it was hilarious because he actually goes up and has Wada Arco make the NPC for Summer 9, and then he shows that to Takeuchi, and then Takeuchi goes, Lip can have a swimsuit. Like immediately, as him first seeing it, he just immediately 180'd and said, all right, we can do it. And he basically described it as Wada Arco did such a good job and she showcased how they could do it without having to like ruin the game's rating, basically. So kind of hilarious that they managed to 180 on this. But yes, we got Passionlip for our 5-star. And I think like the 5-star classification was maybe a little unexpected. But to me, more unexpected now is the fact that she comes to us as a Saber. I did not expect that at all. That would have been one of the last classes I would have picked or thought of it would have been for her. So Passionlip is a single target 5-star Buster Saber. And again, if you had that on your checklist at the beginning of the year, man, you must be prophetic at that point, because I didn't have that. Like, Passionlip was on my list of predictions, but I did not have her even remotely close to something like that. So how does Passionlip stack up against a frankly really stacked class? And how good is her performance, and do you need her? Well, if you're a fan of Passionlip already, the answer is just going to be yes. But what about you people that are maybe more on the fence? Let's go ahead, let's break her down, and let's talk about her. So you guys can see she actually starts out with about 11.7k attack. This is nothing particularly bad, nothing particularly good. She's kind of middle of the road for a 5-star a little bit, maybe even on the lower end a little bit. Her HP value, though, is understandably thick. It is 14k. She is Earth attribute, has 100-star absorption, which is just dead even for a Saber, 9.9 star generation, 0.55 NP charge attack, which is surprising potentially due to the fact that she is a gorilla unit. You'll find out what I mean in a second. That's not an insult. You'll see. She's an NP charge defense unit with 3%, and she has a death rate of 28%, which is just slightly over the average. She has alignment as lawful balanced, which is at least somewhat unique there, and that is a good one. She is gender female and has the basic traits divinity, goddess servant, hominid servant, humanoid, immune to pigify, mechanical, Sakura series, normal servant, 7 night servant, summer mode servant, and weak to Intima Elish. She ends up having a deck that is, as we like to call it, a gorilla deck. That is to say, it's an Oonga Boonga triple buster deck. It is see red, press red. So she only has the single arts card and only has the single quick card. So she has to do a lot with those cards potentially. That's why the NP gain rate only being 0.55 is a little bit surprising. Normally for a unit like this, we might see something like 0.8 or higher. But if we look at the hit counts, we get a little bit of the explanation, because the hit counts here are all above average, with the exception being the extra attack. Now, moving on to Lip skills here, we get to her first skill, and this one is sneakily good. So it is, ironically enough, called Breast Pouch, but if you're familiar with Lip, you should know these names should not surprise you in the slightest. This is a taunt skill that basically will taunt all enemies to herself for 3 turns. It will also grant herself a buff on defense for 5 times over 3 turns that increases her own attack by 10% for 3 turns. So for the next 5 times over 3 turns, whenever she is hit, she will increase her own attack for 3 turns. This is really good for amplifying her damage output. On top of that, utilizing this skill will also absorb damage to restore HP for 1 turn. To understand this, Lip will convert any source of damage that is occurring to her and turn it into HP on the turn that you press this skill. And that is actually potentially really, really strong, depending on how you use her. So if you take her and put her into a challenge scenario, you can use this to effectively Uno reverse the enemy. It's like, oh, hey, you're gonna try to kill me with this? Nah, instead I healed from it. So it is an interesting aspect. It kind of calls back to her alter ego form, and it is very strong when used correctly. Just be careful of death rate with her in that regard, because that will not get stopped. Now, on top of this, also when she is hit, she will charge the party's NP gauge by 20%, except for herself. So this means you actually want Lip to get hit a ton. Lip kind of pulls from her alter ego form and continues that path as being a tank. She actually gets the capability to basically sit here, buff her own damage, heal from it if the enemy hits her, and charge the rest of the party, which means that she does have some potential use for getting another unit online besides herself. And that can be really, really valuable. Or it can just mean getting your supports online and allowing them to help take care of Lip in the interim turns. So it is a really, really nice thing for her to have. What's the downside? Well, one, if you don't lure this skill, you will not get 100% damage absorption. And 2, if you don't lure this skill, you won't have a 7-turn cooldown on it, meaning it'll take you even longer to get this. Now, if you're just using her for farming purposes, you're not going to care as much about this effect. If you're using her in a challenge environment, those cooldowns are going to matter, and doubly so if you combine this with a 5th append and Koyanskaya to allow you to keep getting back to it faster. So again, it's a very, very strong skill. Her second skill is a callback again to her alter ego form. It is Trash and Crash, and this is going to increase her own buster performance for 3 turns. This is just a nice 30% buster steroid. It also allows her to ignore defense for 3 turns, so good luck reducing the damage that she outputs. And it will grant herself a debuff on attack buff for 1 attack over the next 3 turns. That is to say, when you press this skill for her next attack, she will have a 70% chance to stun 1 enemy when she attacks. And that can be particularly good depending on the scenario. Though, if you have the taunt active, be careful because this could interfere with an enemy hitting her. From here, last but not least, it is a 50% charge skill. So this is just a really absurd skill for her in terms of how much it can provide. The downside to this skill is just like with the first one, it is also on the 7-turn cooldown. So you guys are really going to want the 5th append on Lip, and we'll get to that a little bit more in the append section. Then we get to her third skill, Princess Order EX. Now this one's a little bit weird and it has different effects depending on who's being targeted. So basically, if you select an ally that is not Passionlip, you will grant one ally the Prince on the White Horse status for 3 turns. What does that do? It increases the owner's critical damage. One ally gets the critical star regeneration buff for 3 turns, as well as their critical star absorption for 3 turns. And it grants that ally defensive class advantage against 7 Knight Servants class enemies for 3 turns, basically meaning that they take 0.5 damage on top of just outright granting critical stars. So how much does all of that give? Well, basically it's 100% extra crit damage. It is 20 stars per turn. It is 5,000 absorption. And it is 20 Prince stars. So what this means is that this is basically a super buff that's going to allow that unit to pop off. But that's not all, because Lip can also target herself with this skill instead. And when she does, it grants the Brave Princess status for 3 turns, which increases her NP damage, charges her NP gauge every turn for 3 turns, grants herself a Gut status for 1 time 3 turns, and then grants self debuff immunity for 1 time 3 turns, and then increases her own instant kill resistance for 3 turns. So remember what we talked about, instant kill would pass that first skill, but not if you can't be instant killed. So with regards to the scaling on this, the NP damage up is 30%. The regen of the Noble Phantasm gauge is 20%. And the instant kill resistance goes all the way up to 100%. Now, this skill, though, peculiarly enough, is on a 6-turn cooldown. And the reason that matters, I'll talk about in a bit. But that is interesting that this specific skill is not on the same cooldown as the other 2, especially given how much it does. Taking a look at Lip's passive skills here, she gets Magic Resistance B for some debuff resistance, Independent Action C for some additional crit damage, Presence Concealment C, which is hilarious to me that she can conceal her presence, but it is what it is. Critical Star Generation rate by 6%. Goddess Essence C, that is increasing her own damage by a flat 200 amount, as well as debuff resistance additionally by 20%. So Lip is going to be a very hard unit to debuff, even without her actual debuff immunity on. High Servant, which just has no effect, and Gymnast Ballet D, that gives her 2 critical stars every turn, as well as critical damage getting further increased by additional 10%. So she has a laundry list of passive skills, and they're all pretty decent. Now, with regard to her Appends, there may be the idea that, like, hey, we could do something with mana loading. We could really manage to, like, get a little bit of charge here. I'm going to tell you flat out, the first and foremost thing you should go for on Lip is the 5th Append. And the reason why is that 7-turn cooldown on both the first and the second skills. But also the 6-turn cooldown on the third skill. Getting this in effect on the third skill means that you can lower that skill to a 5-turn cooldown. Now, with the first 2 skills coming 6-turn cooldowns, means that Koyanskaya could potentially double them up. The first skill, maybe not that big of a deal unless you're in a challenge environment, but the second skill is your charge. So you need it for that if you want to double up the charge. But the third skill, being on a 6-turn cooldown, now coming down to 5, means you can get that skill back as fast as the second turn. And why would that matter? Well, because that skill not only has 30% NP damage on it, but it also has 20% regen, which means basically by getting it back again on turn 2, by turn 3, we can have 40% charge because you can double stack this now. So that helps out significantly depending on what you're trying to do. Taking a look at Lip's Noble Phantasm, it is a Buster single target Noble Phantasm of 7 hits, and it removes one enemy's buffs activating first. So this is just strong. This is just going to outright basically strip an enemy of all of their stuff unless it is unremovable due to a fight specific gimmick or they have buff removal resistance. From there, it will deal damage to one enemy, and it will deal super effective damage against super large enemies. It also has a 60% chance to instant kill them. Now, death rates are what they are. Understand that there are some interesting things that go into the calculation, including what the enemy type is, as well as its rarity. So don't assume that this means that she's always going to death proc stuff, but there are scenarios where you could secure a death proc. It just depends. Now, her damage scales normally as single target, but she also has an overcharge effect that increases her own burst performance before damage goes out, activating first. Unfortunately, the overcharge is only 10%, so it's maybe not like as strong as some people would hope, but due to the fact that this can be scaled up, this is a nice thing, so it is interesting that they gave it to her. Now, I talked about being able to double up the third skill and getting 40% charge. Why would that matter? Well, not to make your brain hurt here, but basically that's actually the difference in allowing her to Black Grail loop or not. Thing is, you got to do some really unconventional stuff if you want to 3-turn with her, and she is a single target, so how often you need to 3-turn with a single target? Probably not super often, but it is what it is. You would have to probably start out in the front wave with Oberon and a Koyanskaya, and you'd have to use Oberon's charge turn 1, ironically enough. And then from there, you would also want to work in double Koyanskaya charge skills on turn 2, since you would have lost anyways the 20% coming off the back end of turn 1. But then by turn 3, you'd have Passionlip's charge skill back a second time, and you would have 40% from her double stack of the third skill. So from there, you only need the missing Oberon 20%, and that actually manages to make a 3-turn sequence work with Black Grail. So it's really weird, but yes, this is why something like that might matter. So with regards to Passionlip's damage output, Passionlip has, at least raw at NP1, only about 44.9k here. That's not super strong compared to someone like, say, Musashi that's running around at like 70k raw, but this is still pretty darn decent. And against super large enemies where she's super effective, this is 67k now. She's getting a lot more firepower. At NP2 even, the damage does begin to really jump up, so choice is yours as to whether or not to go for this. Now, with regards to her in a one-shot damage composition, how much single target burst can we get her to do? Well, double Koyanskaya Oberon's probably your best bet there. Running a Black Grail, you guys can see these are still neutral numbers, but now we have the benefit of being surrounded by supports and utilizing a craft essence. So you can see just actual damage output pretty darn solid there at 459k. But against super large, we're looking at 689k. And at NP2, you're already just massively jumping again for up to 612k there and 918 against a super large. But if you're in that odd scenario where you're like, hey, maybe I just need to 3-turn against like this boss with break bars, or I maybe need to be able to just kind of keep hitting this same enemy over and over and over again. This is where we've prepared for you guys the Black Grail scenario. This does require the 5th append, remember, but to be honest, like I said, you probably want it anyways over even something like mana loading. But you can see the first 2 waves there, not the strongest there. At least wave 2 gets a little bit stronger, but by wave 3, it really pops off in damage at 487k against super large 731k. And at NP2, you're looking at 650k already and 975k. So you can see getting that second NP level of lip definitely has a huge impact, but is it required? No, certainly not. Like, depending on what you're facing, you might be perfectly fine without it. And it really just boils down to how much actual like monopoly damage do you need in order to overcome the enemy that you're fighting. But yes, Lip is a very, very strong unit in the right circumstances. Now, how does that stack up against another Saber? Well, Musashi is something that we could have compared to, but Musashi doesn't really have charge, so you're looking at some maybe card RNG to really get to a lot of the similar stuff. Instead, we decided let's look at Medusa Saber, who is another single target with 50% charge. Now, Medusa Saber has about 41k raw and 68k against man attribute, which technically we didn't include here, though sometimes we have before. So there is something to be said about the fact that basically Medusa Saber already is just coming in under Lip's numbers. But what about one-shot damage with a proper comp? That'd be double Summer Scotty, Oberon, level 100 Black Grail, and a Neo Plug suit. She's coming in about 428k, almost 429k there, and then 700k, 707 against man. Compared against Lip's 459k and 689k, you're actually ending up at a weird spot where basically against man, Medusa's better, against super large, Lip is better, but just raw, Lip is better. And that is an interesting thing to denote. Though there is something to be said about Medusa's sort of ability to stun units, so it is what it is. Maybe you find that you prefer Medusa's ability to kind of loop back. Maybe you prefer Lip's brute force way of handling this sort of thing. In an actual 3-turn environment, though, Medusa comes out quite a bit less, and that is definitely something to denote, that she's just not going to have the same amount of damage capacity. But basically, you guys can see Lip will just kind of handedly win in a 3-turn environment, though, as we mentioned before, not a super common thing for our single targets to have to do. So, ultimately, I believe Lip stacks up as a very, very solid single target Saber. Is she someone you have to have? No, not necessarily, but she is strong enough to warrant you paying attention, especially due to some of the new unique stuff that she does that hasn't really been done in the game before. So, which ascension of Summer Passionlip do you guys feel like is the best? And again, will you be rolling for her, or will you be delaying for maybe one of the later banners? I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys for the next one. Don't forget, if you haven't already, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out, really helps the channel out. Always appreciate the support, and I will see you guys for the next one. Black box is blocking? Blocking what? Black box is not blocking anything. I mean, like it's blocking that, but this black box is because I'm recording. That's why this is here.